皆さん、こんにちは。ティファニー・レイチェルです。今週も一週間お疲れ様でした。今日はですね、ちょっとシリアスな話になっちゃうかと思うんですけど、言語の壁について話したくて、おそらく私みたいにバイリンガルの人って何かしら、みんながみんなそうってわけではないんですけど、何かしら言語の壁を感じてるところはあるんじゃないかなっていう程度で、ちょっと意見がありまして、それについてちょっと話したいなと思ってるので、早速ですけど入りますか。So first I have the definition of like language barrier, and then I have my definition because I think the way I thought of it was a bit different from what the actual definition is, so I want to kind of share both. So I wrote it down. So the definition of language barrier is a barrier to communication between people who are unable to speak a common language. So an example of this could be one person speaks Russian, another person speaks Arabic, and because they don't speak a common language, they're experiencing a language barrier because they can't communicate. The way I thought of it, I guess just coming from a bilingual perspective, I just had a different look to it. My definition of language barrier is one who speaks multiple languages lacks the ability to articulate a concept from one language to another. So for example, I guess for me, when I speak English and when I speak Japanese, I feel like I'm using two different brains. And so sometimes if I'm thinking in English and talking in Japanese, or thinking in Japanese and talking in English, there are some things that I can't like easily just pull out as a phrase to describe something I'm trying to say. And I tried to think of examples so I could explain this, but there's only one prime example I could think of, which is the word for home country. In English, it's just home country, but in Japanese, there's two words to describe home country. 祖国と母国。でも、英語になると、祖国と母国はどっちもホームカントリーになっちゃうっていう。だから、英語でそれぞれをどう説明するかっていうのがちょっと難しくて、多分一つの言葉にまとめられないっていう。説明すれば、わかることだけど。So to explain it, 祖国 means like your ancestral country. And then your bokoku is like your native or first natured country. So prime example would be me, where my sokoku would be America because my ancestors are from there type of thing. But my bokoku is Japan because I was born and raised here and this is my first language. But again, if you try to say that in English, it's both home country, but in different ways. So it's just things like that where it's hard to articulate into, in this case, English, because there just isn't a word for it. With that being said, there are 5 different reasons that I thought of that I also had to write down as to how language barriers can occur. So I wanted to share each of them and then some examples of each reasons. So the first reason I have that can cause language barrier is there is a direct translation, but the meaning is different. So again, when you're like thinking about this, like what could be an example, it's really hard to think of because most of the time they just come up. But, for the sake of this video and for the sake of explanation, I try to think of one. And one example I had is random, but the word side effect は、日本語で副作用なんですけど、英語圏、アメリカだけじゃないかもしれないですけど、英語圏で使われてる side effect っていうのは副作用以外の使い方もありまして、例えば let's say you're on a journey somewhere, or let's say you're doing something for the sake of this specific goal, then as a side effect of aiming for that goal, you meet new friends, or you gain more skills than what you expected, or things like that っていう使い方もありまして、ただサイドエフェクトっていう言葉を直訳しちゃうと副作用だから、そういうコンテキストでは副作用っていう言葉が使えないっていう。例えば英語でサイドエフェクトっていう言葉が使われてるからって必ずしも副作用っていう意味ではないっていう時もあるっていうことですね。その副作用じゃない意味のサイドエフェクトっていうのは、例えば、ついでにっていうのが一番わかりやすいかなと思うんですけど、何かしらをしててついでに何かが起きるっていう意味のサイドエフェクトっていう意味もあるので、私のアドバイスは直訳しない方がいいと思ってて、ぶっちゃけってことですね。So the next one, the second reason why I think language barrier can happen is there is a direct translation, but the nuance is different. So the word think in English and 思う in Japanese is the same. でも違うんだよ。なんか例えば、プレゼンとかで何々だと考えられますとか何々だと思われますとかっていう言葉を英語に直訳して I think って言ったら、多分だけど英語圏の人からしたら、じゃあ分かったら教えてみたいな。I think って言ったら確定じゃないっていうかって感じになっちゃうんですよね。ただ日本語の思うとか考えられるとかだったら、もうそう考えてるからもうほぼ確定みたいな認識で合ってるんだけど、英語だと違うっていう感じだって感じてて、多分そういうビジネス関係で I think っていうのは、その日本語だったら思われるとか使うけど、英語だったら I think っていうのは絶対やめた方がいいと思ってて、ニュアンスが違うから。で、それと同様に予定するとかもスケジュールって言ったらまだ未定なんですよ。ただ予定されてるとか日本語で言ったら、じゃあもう予定されてるからもうそれでほぼ確定みたいな、それで進行みたいな感じになるけど、やっぱりニュアンスがちょっと違うなってちょっと感じるんですよね。あとこれTikTok 上の単語なんですけど、 POV、英語で言う POV は観点じゃないのよ、視点でもないのよ。POV はなんていうの、観点とか視点ってなっちゃうとそんなシリアスじゃないんだけどみたいなって感じちゃうんですよね。直訳がないんですよ POV の。でも説明するとしたら、でこれ友達とも話したんだけど、ある意味日本でいうあるあるに似てると思ってて、あるある中でのある立場からの視点になるけど、視点っていう言葉時点で違うっていうか、多分これバイリンガルの人じゃないと多分分かってくれないと思うんだけど、違うんだよ。視点でググってみると視点って出てくるけど、ちょっと違うんだよなみたいな感じてて、だからそういうところでも直訳があるけどニュアンスが違うっていう風に感じるところがあるなって思いますね。Okay, so the third reason is there is a direct translation, but it's not used or not often used. The only example I could think of for this is the word for you're welcome. Because in English, it's common to say you're welcome after a thank you. でも日本語でどういたしましてって言っちゃうと違うんだよ。ありがとうって言ってくれたら、いえいえみたいな、どういたしましてとは言わないじゃないですか。だからこれも次の話につながるんですけど、 こういうところで文化の壁を感じるんじゃないかなってちょっと思ってて、それもちょっと複雑な話になっちゃうけど。So yeah, like in English you say you're welcome, but in Japanese you don't really say you're welcome. So the fourth reason is the word is the same, but the meaning is different. And there are two examples I could think of this. Present and mansion. So present is short for presentation, which is presentation. But in English, I can think of two meanings for presentation. Japan only took one of them. So the two meanings that I can think of in English presentation is when you're presenting something, you're doing a presentation. Two is when you have a presentation, like you have a display of something. Japan only took the presentation, like the when you're presenting something presentation, and took that, the presentation shortened as present. So when you say present, it always means when you're like なんか発表してるのを指すみたいな. And so if I wanted to say display presentation, I wouldn't use present because the meaning is different type of thing. So that's one. Two is mansion, which, mansion in English is, one house that could be like 3 stories, but it's one like family living there type of thing. Versus mansion in Japanese refers to 集合住宅を指すから、言葉一緒なのに意味が全然違うっていう、のもありますね。The fifth reason is there is no direct translation. The only example, there's 2 examples I could think of, is the word tsumetai. It means cold, but not exactly. This again, there's 2 words for cold in Japanese. One when you're feeling cold, another when you're like touching something and it's cold. English is like that's bunched up into the 2 meanings are bunched into one. If you touch something, it's cold. If you're feeling cold, it's cold. In Japanese, if you're feeling cold, it's samui. If you're touching something and it's cold, then it's tsumetai. So in that sense, there is no direct translation for tsumetai, really, I would say. The other one is like a lot of the greeting words in Japanese, like お世話になっております、お疲れ様でした、いただきます、ごちそうさまでした、like. And again, I think this is another thing that leads into cultural barrier, which I'll go into also. So to dive right into it, the definition of cultural barrier is when people of different cultures are unable to understand each other's customs, resulting in inconveniences and difficulties. However, this definition actually kind of leads off to what I'm talking about, but just to break down what the definition is,